Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Alright, before we go into the continuation of from next week, which is Karma Yoga, I'd like to bring us back down to basics, and that is, what is the purpose and intention of the Bhagavad Gita? Why is it written, and for whom is it written for? So, the Bhagavad Gita is from the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata is written by Vyasa. Now, during the Dvapara Yuga is before the Kali Yuga. So what happened was, the more the commercialization started to take over, then the youth and the students of the scriptures, of the Shruti, started going less and less to the Gurukulams, to the schools, and getting educated. Because now the crops could be stored and one could survive without needing to live in villages. So that means the dispersion of the population started to move away from the teachers. And simultaneously, the expense of that was this knowledge became less and less prevalent throughout the society, because now the society was further away from the gurus, who were the announcers and the teachers of this knowledge. So that led slowly to a collapse of the society. And so the rishis, Vyasa in particular, noticed that because the ages and times are changing, we have to modify the input of how people learn in order to adapt to the changing ages. Because the Upanishads were designed to be the Shruti. Shruti means heard. And Shruti is oriented, the Upanishads are oriented towards those who are qualified already for self-knowledge. They just are interested in nothing other than spiritual knowledge. They've already moved away from the world. They've already renounced the world, renounced family, renounced, just as a form of recognizing that it's impermanent and it doesn't bring any lasting joy. So those kind of people went straight to the gurus who were teaching the Upanishads. And that means those were niched to be qualified already. However, that was less so due to the dispersion of the society. So we had to develop a new way for the common man, who is an active nature, who is in the world working and amidst of usual problems and challenges that are confronting us in each moment. So for that reason, Vyasa decided to write the Mahabharata, which is 100,000 verses. There is no longer or bigger text in the world than the Mahabharata, and it said that if it doesn't exist in the Mahabharata, you cannot find it anywhere else. And in that time, because there was an amazing clarity amongst the minds due to lack of rajas, as soon as rajas came in the Kali Yuga, which is now the dominant yuga, the less the mind started to have clarity, and thus the revelations, which were at one point natural, became less common. So this had to be written down in a text format for us to read and absorb during our activism throughout the world. And so the Gita word, by the way, means song. And there's many different Gitas. The Bhagavad Gita is not the only one. There is, for example, the Ramayana, which says the Rama Gita. We have the Bhagavatam, which we have the Hamsa Gita, Shiva Gita, Guru Gita. And all of these texts have different Gitas. And usually these Gitas are an extract from these bigger texts. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is an extract of the sixth cantos, or sixth chapter from the Mahabharata, between 25 and 42 chapters, and it's taken specifically just because it is a Gita in itself. So instead of having to go through the entire 100,000 verses, you just take the Gita and you read, in this case, the 700 verses. That's how many verses the Gita has. And so these Gitas are designed to be serving a certain purpose. However, the Bhagavad Gita, the one that we're learning, has a very unique purpose. And the uniqueness comes in several ways. And one of the main ways, as I said, is that it contains a story of characters which we can all relate to. And the story is of Arjuna, who is amidst the battlefield of life. So in the Upanishad niche or group of people, it was very easy. You're already away from the world. You just go up to the Himalayan mountains, the forest, or in these hermitages, and you learn this knowledge. But Arjuna had a different story which we can all relate to, and this is where it's applicable for the common man. Arjuna was amidst the common challenges and anxiety, stress, and he had to deal with consequences as they arose in the moment. And that's something that we can all relate to in this modern world. So you can see why Vyasa had written this, because he observed that the world is moving towards this way, and we are less likely to find and go to the Himalayan or the forest or somewhere isolated. And for that reason, the Bhagavad Gita, amongst all these other Gitas, remains a very unique and practical format for a common person, which is why we're teaching it. The other uniqueness of the Gita is that it's a common dialogue between God and man, or God and woman. And for this, we can also relate, because usually when things get to their worst point, and only then do we start to seek for guidance further than what is the obvious material form of help. We then only turn to something higher. And so this Gita is exactly the same, where Arjuna was already a good warrior. He was already confident, and he had a formation of his army, and everything was well formulated in his mind. However, in that last moment, this is a symbolism, by the way, he decided to go to the center between the two armies. Now, what do you think is a symbolism for someone who's already confident in life, who they think they got it all handled, and they think they already got it all organized and it's all well and rosy, but despite the fact that Arjuna decided to go to the middle of between the two armies? What's the symbolism of that? The symbolism is objectivity. So Arjuna asked Krishna. Krishna is the symbol for intellect. Arjuna, despite having confidence in life and at least thinking that it's all okay, still decided to utilize the intellect, and the intellect has led that one between two sides. Meaning what? I choose to look at this objectively. Because you don't find that in an army, do you? It's just one side and then the other side. When it's go time, it's go time. But despite that, he decided to utilize and review the situation so he could see a clear viewpoint from both sides as to discern what is the best course of action. So similarly, that is the first lesson that comes in the Gita right from the beginning. Despite thinking that we may have got it, it is still utilizingly helpful to utilize that intellect which is given to you as the greatest gift to be a human being, and review the situation where you're at from that perspective, just in case that something may have been missed. And in Arjuna's case, he has missed something, because when he came to the center, he did something very good. He decided to utilize his intellect. Very good. He gets one tick. But what happened after is just like life. It has no endings. So it's not like, okay, now I've utilized my intellect and I've reviewed the situation, now I can rest. Life doesn't work like that. Because what happened is he came to the center and he reviewed the situations, one side and the other, looks at it from a bird's eye perspective. And then he realizes the enormity of the war, of what's actually the situation. Yeah? So he goes, wow, I didn't realize it was so big as I thought it was from one side. Now, from that point on, he breaks down into, and his spirit collapses from uplifted to dejected. This is very common where we have this confidence and some other perspective occurs and we go, I actually haven't really got it. And then we crash. So from this point onwards, Arjuna obviously had a crash, seeing the enormity of the situation thanks to the objectivity that he has utilized. And from that moment on, then Krishna, who is a symbol of the intellect, consults him as to how to regain his composure and continue what his duty or her duty, what he has or she has to do. Because Krishna is telling Arjuna very clearly that despite it not seeming like this is the right situation, if Arjuna, you do not proceed with what you have to do, then what's going to happen is it's like trying to skip a step. And what happens when we try to skip a step is we're dragged back to that step at some point in life in the future. So it's better to address it right on the spot versus trying to skip it and then say, I'm going to deal with that later. It doesn't work like that because that situation is only going to intensify during that gap of trying to escape it. So this brings us to three options actually that the Gita gives us in a very concise manner as to what you can do in any situation. Actually, the only three options that you have. And we're going to talk about that now because that's the three options that Arjuna seemingly had, but I'll talk about why it's seemingly. Okay, the first option that Arjuna seemingly had was to escape. In other words, he was in the center and seeing the enormity of the situation. Well, I do not wish to deal with this. I do not wish to kill my revered teachers who were on the other side. I'm just going to escape. Now, the problem with escaping, or in other words, leaving the situation, is, number one, it's an instinctive impulse. It's very natural for a human being to move away from the situation when it's not appealing to one's senses or their likes. However, the situation from then on worsens, whether it's acknowledged or denied, it doesn't matter. Just by the nature of something requiring your presence and then choosing to leave that presence, that in itself instantly starts to worsen the situation when it's attended to in the future. For example, we have, in the world, this is observed on a particular night after some work, where a person chooses to indulge in an intoxicant. And it's all rosy, as the chart says. It's all rosy for a while. But think about it this way. Why would someone choose to come out of their present state even for 5 minutes, in this case of a drunk person? Does that not, in a subtle way, imply that I am not currently happy with what I have? Yeah, I'm not happy with the state that I have. So therefore, I choose to, at least for however long it's going to last, choose to escape it temporarily. Now, it does work, but the problem is, despite it working, it has an aftermath. And that aftermath, obviously, is, in this case, the hangover. Now, you know what happens with the hangover, right? The hangover lasts for an equal duration as the person got drunk, sometimes even longer. And that leads to circumstances where it clouds the mind or the intellect the next day. And let's say the next day you have to do it's your day when you have to do something very important. But now the intellect is clouded. And now the intellect is missing, so it cannot attend fully to the situation. Thus, the person completely misses out the next opportunity, which was meant to take them further to their spiritual evolution. So this is where it comes to cause and effect. That's what we're coming to. In other words, for every action, it has a cause. It's a cause. Every action is a cause. You chose to come here, that's an action. It's a cause. Every cause has an ultimate preceding effect. Effect means reaction. So every action has a reaction. So in the case of drinking, it's a cause. One chooses to do something. But it's unavoidable. The way the world is set up, you cannot have a cause without an effect. You will have an effect. For example, this is simply observable in your experience. Let's just take that this this, I'm going to take this lid and I'm going to drop it, right? So that dropping is your option, your free will. That's where you have the free will. And you say, I'm going to drop it. But as soon as that's done, that cause is performed, the effect takes over. Now, the effect is beyond your control. That's what we mean when we say Ishvara is the facilitator of your actions. It's not the one, it's Ishvara God is not the one who is like a puppeteer who's moving everyone and then telling you what's going to happen, when it's going to rain, when you're going to get this, when you're going to, whatever it is. Ishvara is not like that. Ishvara is just a facilitator of the actions which you choose to impose. I'm choosing to impose dropping this. When I do, I leave it to Ishvara. In this case, Ishvara being gravity, takes over. You see? So that means that this cause and effect is constantly operating, and Karma Yoga, which is the topic we're on now, is simply understanding that no matter what actions you're imposing, it's always going to have an effect. Now, the effect may not always be pleasant. It may sometimes, but not always. In that case, there's no choice but to accept the effects, knowing that I have no control if this drops over here or if it drops over there, and then maybe hits a dog and then the dog ends up biting me. See, it's totally out of your hands. All you can do is what you can do. That's why we say you cannot blame yourself ever, because the whole world, the way it's set up is, we don't know everything. So all we can do is what we can do in the moment, but we cannot tell the entire thread of causes and effects that follow once we impose an action. Yeah. So that's the message. And also this instinctive reaction is only going to, of course, increase, because there's a common phrase that says, what you resist persists. In other words, what I resist due to not willing to confront it is only going to persist in my mind. Now, if it persists in my mind, just one of those things, imagine a series of things that I'm resisting. That equals a mind that's constantly noisy. And a mind that's constantly noisy is not going to be interested in sitting down and listening attentively. So you can see how one cause, seemingly unrelated, has an effect that spills in every area of life. Because even if one, let's say, has a certain a method of denying, then that stays in the mind. And now they go to listen to their wife or husband. And now they can't listen to their wife or husband 100% because they denied something that is totally unrelated to the situation at home. You see? So it carries on as a thread. So that's what we mean what Ishvara is. It's a series of causes and effects ongoingly, and it's beyond anyone's power to even try to grasp. Because if you think about it, cause and effect. Is there a cause, question, without an effect? Is there an effect without a cause? Okay, let's explain why. So why do we apply a cause? Cause equals action. Why do we imply an action or impose an action? Does that not imply that, okay, why do you impose an action? To deal with an effect, right? Right? So something has happened, that's an effect. And then what do? We impose an action. That's what a cause is. So that means there is no cause unless there is an effect. And there cannot be an effect unless it's caused by cause. So that means cause and effect are one and the same. That's why you're hearing some people will say there is no such thing as cause and effect. However, it's not useful just to say that. You got to explain what that actually means. So what that means is you cannot see. As soon as I drop this, that's a cause, and it produced an effect. But once the effect has been produced, what happens next? I react to that. That's another cause, right? And so what I do afterwards is a simple continuation of what's happened before. So that means this entire universe is nothing but a continuation of causes and effects, ongoingly, one after another. Whether the universe comes into a state of, sleeps, the night of Brahman, or whether the universe manifests again. The scientists would say exactly the same thing, that the universe comes to a total state of nothingness. It's just consciousness, and then it comes out as what you see now, as the world. So even that is just a continuation of causes, one after, causes and effects. You see, it's just like when you go to sleep, in deep sleep. Okay, now in deep sleep we can call that when the universe goes into a state of nothingness. But what happens when you wake up? You continue from yesterday, right? You don't suddenly wake up as someone different. You continue from yesterday. Similarly, the universe, when it comes to a sleeping state, when it goes into nothingness, when it continues, what happens then? All that happens, it continues from the previous, quote, night of sleeping. You see, so the universe, despite it being a series of awaking and sleep, it's still a continuation of the previous manifestation. Okay, so in other words, manifest, things happen. This is manifest right now. Things are happening. Unmanifest. Now, where has that unmanifest gone? In the causal body. Ishvara's causal body. Okay, that's what Ishvara means, causal body. Now, when it comes back to manifest, does that manifest have a continuity from the previous manifest? Yes. Yeah. Just like when you wake up, you have a continuity from the previous day. In other words, this whole universe is nothing but a continuation of eternity. You see? So there's no such thing as beginning here. Everything is eternal. So you can't say what came first, the chicken or the egg, the father or the son. Because there is no father without the son, nor is there a son without the father, right? The father was a son at one point, but who gave this birth to the son? You had to have a father. So similarly, we cannot say that the universe had a starting point, because that's the linear mind trying to put a beginning to creation. Everything here is just a continuation of these infinite series of causes and effects.
Just to visualize what you're doing with the bottom top there, where you were saying the cause is opening the hand and the top starts to fall, and it sort of appears that the effect is when it lands in the other hand. What you're actually saying is, because it's instantaneous at any point.
That's right.
Whilst it is the cause when you've consciously decided to open your hand is the start of the cause, but every milling or nano point in that whole falling process, even before it hits the hand, is still cause and effect.
That's right.
All the way through.
That's right. And one singularity.
And even when it's landed in the hand, it's still going through cause and effect until it disintegrates into nothingness, and it's still cause and effect.
That's right. That's right. So it's a constant series, what Martin is saying, it's a constant series of never-ending causes and effects. Okay. Now, that's the first method how people choose to deal with the situation. I know we just kind of went into a cause and effect, but we'll now bring it back into how to deal with the situation. The second way is to try to change a situation. Very common. Try to change another person, try to change the neighbor, try to change the colleague, try to change the spouse, try to just change or modify the situation. Now, there's a problem with this, okay? Now, let's analyze what is the problem with trying to change anyone at all. The thing is, when there is an attempt to change, there are two variables involved. First of all, the subject and the object, right? When we try to change, there's always two involved. In other words, the one who doesn't like necessarily how things are. So that one tries to change or modify the situation. The problem with changing is, not only is the subject changing, because their own ideas about what is preferable is also changing every moment, but also what they're trying to change is also changing. So by the time I change that according to my preference, from that moment on, it's naturally subject to evolution of its own. Because nothing in mithya stays the same. Everything has an evolution. Everything changes. So the problem with trying to change, once again, a person, for example, is let's focus on the person. We'll just say the subject is fixed, even though it's not. But let's say that the person changes exactly how they should be according to your likes and dislikes. The reason why that doesn't work and it leads to eventual conflict is because that subject, when they change, then, as I said, that from that moment on, they have a mind of their own. And that mind is naturally going to evolve based on the causes and effects of its own life. Because he or she is going through their own life, right? And every effect causes them to address that effect, which is a cause, and that modifies their thinking about life. Similarly, the subject who said how you should be or shouldn't be, their own idea about their own mind, their own intellect, their own feelings about the world are also changing. So that means that if I say, please change for me, and let's say they do change and they stay like that. Question, are they going to stay like that? No, because even if they do, I'm changing. Because I'm constantly exposed to the world, which causes me to get involved with the world, which causes me to have different opinions about the world, which then, when I turn my head back onto them, I see them suddenly different, right? Because I've changed. They haven't changed. I've changed. So then I try to say, no, you need to change again for me. But I've changed, not them. So we have a two-way problem when we try to change anything at all, you see? So what happens is, because this non-apprehension of the way that everything in mithya is changing, including your mind, body, intellect, everyone you know, everyone you don't know, including yourself, because due to the non-apprehension of that, one ends up in a constant cycle of trying to find problems to solutions, and by the time the solution is solved, it's already changed, and then it's now become a new problem, which I also have to solve. Okay, so this leads into eventual state of samsara, getting involved in the endless world problems. I'll tell you how this ties into practical living. The other option is to accept. Now, when we say accept, what we really mean is, you're not going to accept unless you're not even going to get into a situation to accept something unless there is something that's bothering you about it. So in this case, accepting simply means suffering, because okay, I can't do anything about the other side or the other object. So all I have, and I can't change them. So my only option is just to accept them. But is that going to cause peace in me? Probably not. Because I have a thought that I wish them to be different. I have a need to escape. But because I have no choice, I can't escape and I can't change, then what's the other option? I need to stay put and therefore suffer the consequences of having to deal with this object ongoingly. So that means the consequence of trying to accept something, in most cases, not in all, but in most cases, is it has to come out somehow in some form of energy, and it usually comes out as blame, pointing fingers. And that is, something's wrong and I don't like, and how I want things to be and how I don't want things to be. In other words, for example, Arjuna, he also tried to blame and said, Pandavas, because he's in the brotherhood of the Pandavas, why out of the 5 brothers am I here responsible for leading this war and killing the other side? Why not somebody else? So that's that subtle form of complaining, trying to get out of it in a form of blaming the world. The problem why this doesn't work is, first of all, nothing really changes. And it only intensifies and verifies and validates that this is indeed a problem. So that's a two-part. So in other words, all 3 methods have problems. Yeah. So now the question is, what do we do if the solution is not to change, not to escape, and not to accept? Like, what's the solution? Because see, changing, accepting, and escaping all belong to what? Mithya. So can you see where this is leading to? And mithya is what? What did I say earlier? Cause and effect? Eternal. So that means what? The attempt to change, modify, or escape is never going to end. if one believes that they are a person. So what's the solution? The only way out is to know who you are, as I said. To know you are that non-changing, invariable principle, and everything else, let that be as it is. Because that's Ishvara. You did not create the world. It's not, you need to accept whatever it is you need to accept. But do not try to, impose ideas, because this is an eternal creation. So there is no point investing energy trying to change or escape or accept. You let that to Ishvara. Okay, I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm just saying you need to know, where is your focus? Is my focus entirely in the situation, which is going to cause me to either indulge in whether I should escape, change, or suffer, or is my focus on me? Is your focus on yourself?
Is that where the idea of surrendering comes?
You could say surrendering, yeah. Surrendering to Ishvara. Completely surrendering to Ishvara. Embracing and surrendering to Ishvara, knowing that Ishvara is nothing but a series of causes and effects. And there is nothing that a human being can do about it. In terms of the effects. The causes, yes. But in terms of the effects, no. Okay, so we're saying that because there's a tendency to think that, well, it's all Ishvara and Ishvara is controlling everything. It doesn't work like that. I said Ishvara is just a facilitator of your actions, and you have no control after you have applied your free will to create an effect that is favorable to your growth. You see where you do have control? You ask yourself, where or how can I create a cause, an action, which by its doing will have a favorable effect in the future.
So even though that cap is just static there, the cause and effect is still happening because there's things impacting on it which it causes an effect.
Yeah, and exactly. And even the effect of that somehow has caused everyone to notice it, and you were totally innocent to noticing it. You had no choice but to notice it. So this cause produced an effect which I have totally no control. I could not say, no, don't notice that. You noticed it. So that's, and now you're probably going to talk about that cap dropping down. So it just leads to a series of events that you totally don't have any control. Yeah. But what you do have control is, how do you look at a situation? Because, okay, it's happened. So what? It's happened. But now because how you look at a situation is what? Your cause. It's your action. So that means you do still have control how you look at as to what has happened. That's where your control is. But what happens, that's out of our hands. I do not have control for that cap to land over there. Okay.
That calls for a lot of refinement in your thinking, because if I'm driving home and there's an accident, at one level I can recognise this is not a significant event for anyone.
Yeah.
But at another level, social level, I have to act. And I have to I don't have to, but it's an impulse to follow that. So, so you go home witnessing a death or something like that, yet at one level, it's, if you know who you really are, it's uneventful.
Yeah.
So there's a really lot of refinement in your responses.
Yeah,
because we're socially bred, and whether that's Ishvara or what, it's confusing for me, but yeah, there's a lot of refinement.
Yeah, because as you said, we're socially bred to probably change it, or just avoid it, or dumb it down, or suppress it, or to just to accept it, but in a silent state of suffering, not fully resoluting as to what has happened. Because see, even trying to accept it, what did we say last week? What did Krishna say? Action is always better than non-action. Because if I do not apply action, then what? What is stays, and what isn't, what is not serving, right? It's a program running. So if I don't address that program, it's going to seem like, oh, it's fine, but it's not fine, because I'm now suffering and accepting it, because it's going to play out at some point in the future. So the option of non-action is completely not. It's not an option. It's not an option. Yeah.
So in that situation that they're explaining there, in terms of the human interaction with that situation, is what I'm hearing, that your awareness has to be there, but not tainted by the mithya,
yeah.
the assumptions and the mental projections about what may be, but just seeing it for what it is.
That's right.
And knowing the right action that might need your involvement in that
Yes,
particular
yes.
scenario.
Well said. Yeah, right action that is appropriate in that moment. That because every action.
You don't try to shut it down and drive away.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because every action, every effect demands a cause. You see. Okay, so now Krishna, Lord of the universe. That's the symbol of Krishna. It's just the Bhagavad Gita, as I said, is Vyasa wrote it and in a state of meditation, and it was transcribed. In that moment, it was very easy to just close your eyes and just have mantras coming out. It's still common today. Yeah, you actually see it. So that's how the Bhagavad Gita came out. So it's Ishvara talking through a vessel, a human vessel, in a form of Krishna. And so Krishna now did not allow Arjuna to, number one is to escape, nor to suffer. Because obviously Arjuna wanted to leave to the forest. He wanted to just contemplate on the self, on the truth. But Krishna didn't want that. He said, no, that's not an option, because this situation, you put yourself in this situation. Right? Just like with Garrett's car example, that accident doesn't happen for an accident. That's not an accident. See, we cannot trace the cause, because there's such a gap between, right? So, for example, let's say you eat something that is unhealthy, let's say 3 weeks, and then let's say a piece of, a cake that has milk from a cow with mad cow disease. And 3 weeks later, right, so many things have happened in between. And suddenly, fever, the person starts losing it, goes mad, and they're trying like, what's wrong with me? I don't deserve this. So, see, our memory is not, we cannot trace it back, but it always has that cause. So similarly, this cause and effect is constantly in action, and for that reason, whatever happens is simply that continuation of a cause which we cannot trace, including a car accident. I know it sounds kind of harsh. Yeah, but that's see, Ishvara does not make mistakes. Everything is perfectly timed and in the right place at the right time, based on the simple observation of cause and effect. Yeah. Okay. So now Krishna also did not, he didn't allow Arjuna to...
Just go back a couple of seconds. So that cause and effect, what we said there about everything, that's essentially where the karma thing comes in as well, isn't it?
It does. I'm not going to put that now, because then I have to go into Sanchita, Prarabdha, Agami, Karma. Yeah, we've done that in a previous session. Yeah, but I know where you're going. It's very good. Okay, so now also, Krishna being the Lord of the universe, he also did not change the situation. Because he could have just easily, maybe, magic wand and then tell Duryodhana, who was leading the other army, to say, no, just knock some sense into you. Why did the Lord not even do that? Because if you change one thing, the whole thing falls apart. There's no such thing as suddenly changing. You have to let it take its natural course of action, its natural resolution. So no one's going to save you, basically. That's what we're saying. There is no someone who's going to come down and say, see, you have to get yourself out of that situation, because you put yourself in that situation through your own causes. That's the message. So...
And does that mean that there has to be a certain conformity to some sort of laws, just like that was conforming to the laws of gravity, to the laws of material?
That's called dharma, yeah.
And so in this particular situation you're talking about now, it's the cause is probably less clear in terms of, we're not talking physics, we're talking metaphysics.
Yeah.
That means that there's laws of, well, the dharma.
They always did. No, see, if you break the law of, let's say, speaking to someone harshly or in some kind of a way, then if one is clear enough, they're going to feel their own, something comes up. Or someone mistreats another. It's always, see, it's a violation of the law. So, as I said last time, and I asked, put your hand up if you want to be hurt. If you like to be hurt. Yeah. See, you can't do it. Because, see, you don't even have to learn that you don't want to be hurt. You just don't want to be hurt. You try to even hurt an ant or try to suppress its path, it just instantly moves away. So it's that law that you speak of, it's inbuilt, and you have to conform to that. If we don't, then what's going to ensue is the effect of suffering. And that effect of suffering is then going to lead one into attempt to get out of it. So you see, even a criminal can get out of their own situation. Because when they've done so many bad things like Duryodhana, they suddenly realize, my God, this is not working. Right? Because all of the actions which have, all the causes which I've created are creating effects which at some point or another come to a point where I cannot bear it anymore. So then that propels a person to start looking into a different direction and then get out of their own situation. So that means the message is only you can help yourself through the actions that you choose to do in every moment. Similarly, for example, the cause is coming to class. That has a natural effect, and the effect is when we come out, then there are certain messages, certain thoughts, which are the effects of your cause, and those thoughts are now going to cause you to act differently in the world, and the world is going to therefore respond differently, and then you're going to go, wow, the world is responding positively. And then, so the whole world starts to look different, all because of the action of your own doing, which is the cause. And then somebody else gets influenced by your positive behavior, and they have an influence, so let's say 4 people, and they start to positively influence those 4 people, and those 4 people have friends, and those friends also get it. So it's down the line you go. So the whole world is so intricately connected with these causes and effects that all as a person one can do is be mindful of what kind of actions and causes they're implying or imposing at any one moment, knowing that they're going to have an inevitable effect down the line in the future, which you have to then address. So the question is, do I want to apply a cause which is going to have an unfavorable effect, or apply a cause in the now which is going to have an effect which is going to serve me and everyone else in the future? You see, that's where your power comes, in the now.
Isn't that a contradiction of what you said before about not being invested in your actions for a certain outcome?
Yes, it's a yes and a no. The reason for that is, if we're going to come to this part where even a wise person, you do not suddenly go, well, it's all Ishvara, right? And so I don't have to do anything, because there's still a person involved. And the one who knows the truth, they know everything is Ishvara. And Ishvara, the jumper, is not separate from the wool. So if one part of let's say this is whole creation, let's say this part is self-realized, moksha. And so why would this part suddenly choose not to, apply actions in order to help out the rest? Because the rest is it. It's not separate from the rest. So we're not just saying it's not black or white, you see. That's always another teaching underneath it, where despite having knowledge and being firmly established in it, it doesn't mean let's just rest and let Ishvara do the whole thing. Because if I do that, then why would I do that if that's implying separation, isn't it? Huh? That's a different reality. I'm in my own reality here. That's Advaita. See, understanding self-knowledge, it just means everything is Ishvara. And including the one who is thinking that everything is Ishvara, including the one who is staying apart from Ishvara. That one's also Ishvara. It's non-separate. So how can one suddenly choose to go, I'm not going to participate in the whole when it is already part of the whole? Does that answer?
Well, not really, because I was thinking more along the lines of saying that you would take an action now
that
is going to benefit you and others in the future.
Yeah.
But you don't know that when you take that action. So you may take an action which doesn't do that.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, good point. So in that case, do not be too attached to the action. That's what karma yoga is. Karma yoga definition equals applying action without the concern of their results. Right? So what you're saying is right on what karma yoga is about. That yes, I can apply action and I do have choice, but ultimately whether I think it's good or not good, that I still actually don't know, because I could still be distorted in my own knowledge, and I could think it's a good action, but it actually leads to a not good action. So what we're saying, it's a good point you brought up, is despite applying an action, the highest attitude you can have in this context is not to be concerned about what result is going to ultimately produce. And despite that, still apply the best that you can in the moment, because everyone's limited in their knowledge, in their relative knowledge. So you can only do what you can do, right? Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Not be concerned, but still stay aware.
That's right. Not be concerned, but still stay alert, mindful, and aware, and try to do the best in every second. So now, so Krishna could not allow Arjuna to change nor to escape, nor did the Lord, the Krishna, try to change the other side, because the problem was not one, not two, not three. The problem was Arjuna's own mind. Remember, the whole Bhagavad Gita is nothing but a metaphor of the process in one's own mind between the spiritual and the material, between the spiritual, the formless, and the form. So that's why we always have this confusion. Am I the material person, or am I the spiritual person? Why is it that I have holy thoughts, but then I have impure thoughts? Why is it that I have good thoughts, and then I suddenly turn to dark, gloomy thoughts? If this is the case in your experience, which I know it is, that is completely common to every single human being in the world. So the Bhagavad Gita is that manual which gets one out, teaches one how to get out of that constant shifting one to the other, and answer what is the truth of the entire creation, and how to live amidst that creation. That's why the Gita is so valuable today. So now, the mind of Arjuna was, as a result of Krishna's teaching, corrected through the right vision of the whole, Sarvam Brahmaha, from the beginning we've been teaching. And also, once the vision of the whole is gained, then you can apply the right action, which is also inclusive of your question, is that I cannot apply a right action unless I am first taught what is Dharma, what is right. So that's where the value of the scriptures come. You see, science provides scriptures how to improve your quality of living. For example, a hard chair versus a soft chair, right? More comfort. That's living. So your quality of living has improved. A slow CPU versus a fast CPU, computer. That's improving your experience in living. But the scriptures, religion, where religion comes in, is quality of life. See the difference? Quality of life is how do you see the world? Because despite this chair being really soft and cozy now, thanks to science, what if this person is miserable? Is science going to fix that? It can't. Because science is dealing with external. But what about the subjective? That's where religion comes in. So that means the sacred and the secular have to be entwined together for a life of spiritual growth, but also a life of security and all of the other things that make your effort a lot easier in the world. If one is done at the expense of the other, it's not going to work. This is another little mistake that people will make. They will try to run away from the world and just pursue the Lord, or just be totally in the world and then totally forget about who they are. So we have to have those two sides. So that's where the Shruti, the scripture, comes to train you how to live in the right way, so you can know what is the right course of action to apply, so you can have a favorable effect in the future. Yeah. So you see, and today our deficiency in a society is no scriptures. Now it's science. It's all technology, talking about the external world, talking about how to improve your house, renovating, making things better, faster car, all these things, and they're all about science. But what about the subject? What about the person who is speaking about all that? That's where religion comes in. Yeah. And if one doesn't know what religion is, then they'll just brush it off as something that is not needed in the world. So what we really do need is this kind of knowledge, especially to our youthful kids in schools. Yeah. Okay, so now having the right vision and attitude, one can apply the right action. And once they have this vision, they can see clearly without any fear or tension as to, or any kind of anxiety as to what kind of effect this cause is going to apply. Think about it. If somebody is afraid of applying an action, why is that? There's fear there, right? There's fear. Why is there fear?
Fear of the outcome.
Fear of the outcome. And why is there fear of the outcome? Lack of vision of the whole. Lack of what Ishvara is. I am fearful because maybe God's going to punish me. It doesn't work like that. Once you know that Lord Ishvara is nothing but a facilitator of your actions, what is there to be fearful of? Because it's entirely up to you. You're the one who is in the driver's seat. You're the one who applies the right action, which is going to have the right effect. And even if a criminal decides to one day suddenly see the scripture and go, wow, this is really interesting, even they can get out of their own misery faster than a materialist who's living in a luxurious home and completely disinterested in religion. That's why in the Bible it says a man, what does it say? A rich man, it's harder for a rich man to go to heaven than to take a... No, it's not a camel, it's the wrong word. It's in the King James. The actual word is a rope. Than to take a rope through the eye of a needle. Now, why did they say that? Because a rich man is what can... I'm not saying, I'm not judging now. It's just a pointer. Because a rich man is naturally, it's very hard to be interested in something that is unseen. Right? Like, why would I do that if I got everything here? If everything that I need is here, everything's fine. I've got my wife, I've got this, I've got my house, I've got the beach. What more is there to pursue? And there is infinity in mithya anyway, so it keeps me busy. And I've got all the money and resources to continue getting whatever I want. So then you see how it's very hard to get out of that mode and start looking at something that is not instantly available in the moment, which is the unseen, the self, you, consciousness. Yeah, so that's the reason behind it. All right, so now let's change the tone and go on to the scripture. All right, so now we're still on Karma Yoga and we're going to hopefully get to the summary, but don't think it's the end of chapter 3 summary, because next week we're going to go into a lot of detail and questions, and we're going to participate. So now we're coming to the end of chapter 3, sort of. And we mentioned a few things last week, and we said, you do not gain ever free action by awareness. You do not realize who you are fully by the non-performance of action. Now, the reason it says non-performance of action, it means that if I just choose not to do anything, because after all, consciousness is not a doer, it's just awareness. So if one tries to act as if they are consciousness, right? Oh, consciousness is just ever free, ordinary, eternal, limitless awareness, which is not doing. It's just aware of Ishvara. Ishvara is where all the doing happens. So I'm just going to be a non-doer. Okay? Now there's a little problem there. What's going to happen is nothing. Right? Because if I'm not doing anything, the vasanas are still there. The ignorance, the non-apprehension of reality still remains. Right? So if I don't apply some action, then what my ignorance stays exactly the same. That's why there is no option to try to not do anything. So, I acknowledge you for applying action to do something. In this case, you're listening. And the second is, nor does one recognize their eternal, non-changing nature by renouncing the results of action. In other words, okay, well, consciousness is not a doer. It doesn't do anything. So I'm just not going to, once again, apply any act. I'm just going to stay put. I'm just going to meditate and just have a good, peaceful life. What's the problem with that? Who's doing that? A doer. So a doer is deciding to do the non-doing. So what has the doer really gotten rid of? No one. The doer just made a claim not to do, but the doer who made that claim is still remaining there. The ego still remains. So now the doer is just free, is free from worldly activity, but not free from itself. The point of liberation is to be free of the person, of the doer, not to identify with the panchakosha, with the three bodies. So just by saying I'm not going to do anything, nothing really happened. The life has certainly changed because I'm not doing anything, but the ego, the door is still there. So moksha is not, as I said last week, not freedom for the door, it's freedom from the door. You see the difference? Freedom from the door. I'm not saying that the door is going to die because your ego has a function. It needs to communicate, it needs to work. But the freedom from identifying oneself as the door, right? So that's two little cautionary things to address. That's why I brought it up. And then we also went on to the three guna management. And the three gunas are very interesting because they can be managed through different activity. And what more do you want to hear than, oh, really, there's something I can actually do? There's a way to manage these gunas which can help me with my temperament? Yeah, there is. For example, if, we're not saying eliminate the gunas, we're saying manage them. For example, in order to sleep, you need tamas, right? You know that fatigue, that tiredness, that drowsiness, that dullness, you need that to go to sleep. So that's why in the spiritual world, especially for sometimes mostly women I observe, is that when they get too much into yoga, movement, or too clear, like just too sattvic, too peaceful, they have trouble sleeping because there's excess sattva. So we're saying you need a certain level of rajas and tamas amongst sattva. For example, a person who falls asleep in meditation, why is that? Let's say they're very clear and they fall asleep. What do they need more of? Rajas. Rajas is energy. You need some energy to stay alert and awake. So you still need this energy in order to focus. And you need tamas to be stable, to have stability, because tamas is that, like, I don't want to do anything, I just want to stay in one place, right? So what we're saying here is these gunas are meant to be managed through the causes that you choose to apply at any one moment. And that's what you do have control over. So in other words, sattva being the noble energy, the energy which is required for clarity, for discrimination of variable and invariable, of the self and the non-self, for that energy you need a certain activity which cultivates that. For example, anyone, any contributions? Something that brings peace and calmness. Meditation, yeah. Walking in the forest, I guess.
Sailing.
Yeah.
Sailing.
Yeah. And also, similarly, if one is not entirely alert or they're falling asleep, then they certainly need to cultivate more rajas. And for that, there's a lot of practices. In fact, the rajas is easiest to cultivate because you got just an option of different art forms, martial arts, yoga, hatha, ashtanga, painting, gardening, whatever it is, cleaning, whatever it is, just moving. And those have to be properly managed to have an experience which helps you, which serves your actions in a most creative, loving, peaceful way. Okay.
What activities? What would generate tamas?
Tamas is just a staying put. You don't have to worry about tamas actually, because tamas is it's always okay. Here's a question: what would I have to do to reduce tamas, right? Because tamas reduction equals more clarity. You probably met people who are dull and slow in their responses, slow in their conversation, whatever it is. They're just slow. That's excess tamas. If they're very fast, that's excess rajas. If they're just calm, but also very alert and aware and clear, that's sattva. Okay, so now how to reduce tamas? By implying or imposing actions which are rajasic. In other words, you can't go from here to there. You need to go from one to the next to the next. So once again, the answer is how to reduce tamas is by applying actions which are of the nature of movement.
Am I visualizing this properly? Is the tamas the same as the nadi? Is the guna is the same as the one that says the nadis? Have you heard of
The what?
the nadis, the 3 channels?
Oh, the nadis. No.
We're talking about something
No, that's from yoga, the nadi channels. No, we'll get back to the 3 gunas in detail, by the way. This is just a general introduction, because the gunas are at the end of the course. Yeah. But I'll mention here and there about the gunas so that it's, there's some knowledge about them. Okay. Self-knowledge is hidden by desire. The insatiable fire of desire is the constant enemy of the wise because it prevents self-knowledge. Okay, so here, self-knowledge, in other words, discrimination, variable and invariable, you, consciousness, and the object, anything other than the subject. Are we clear on that? Subject and object. Subject is you, object is anything other than you. Anything that you perceive, think about, or observe, whether external or internal, that's the object. Self-knowledge is hidden by desire. Now, what is desire? Rajas. The insatiable fire of desire is the constant enemy of the wise because it prevents self-knowledge. Even the wise have an issue with this rajas. We're not saying that when the rajas is there, the wise suddenly lose discrimination. We're just saying it has to be managed. So it's not saying here the wise person suddenly forgets who they are because there's rajas. It's just saying that since these 3 energies are constantly operating, one has to constantly, mindfully manage them. And even for a wise person, let's say they come into a discussion, an argument, then that argument is certainly rajasic. You're not going to have a peaceful argument. You will, but not, in most cases. So even the wise have to keep their minds have to protect their minds, because as soon as Rajas comes, the clarity goes. Like clear, noble thoughts go. Tact remains, because tactic and strategy, that's Rajas. So any business person, any very tactful person who is, constantly analyzing, calculating, that's Rajas. But that's different from noble thoughts, deep noble thoughts about your existence and existence about everyone. That's sattva. So for that case, if a wise person is to retain that depth, that wisdom, they have to protect their mind from rajas. That's what it's saying. Situated in the senses, mind and intellect, so we're talking about desire. So desire situated in the senses, mind and intellect, it deludes the person and obscures his or her wisdom. That's just what I'm saying now, is that because these 3 energies permeate the entire universe, including the person, the panchakosha, or the 3 bodies, when one of those energies is on the axis of rajas, then, as it says here, it deludes the person. In other words, their view of reality is distorted, or there's mistakes. So you said also brought up tamas. If someone makes, I even sometimes make mistakes when I speak, I recognize it. But if a person makes mistakes, the proportion to the amount of mistakes they make, despite them knowing about the topic, is the direct proportion of the amount of rajas or tamas in that exact moment. Right? So what one has to do is just bring their mind back down into a sattvic state. So that's what we mean by managing the sattva, or the rajas or the tamas. Okay, it obscures his or her wisdom.
On the previous page you said serpent per Bible on the rajas?
Yeah, rajas is just a metaphor. The Bible has its own terms, and we can equate it, and we just call a serpent that desire, that selfish, egocentric desire.
Okay.
Yeah. Therefore, O Arjuna, control the senses at the outset and destroy this force, the killer of wisdom. Now, it says at the outset. It doesn't say once it's already in action. Because, see, it's very hard to take ownership of something that's already gained a momentum. You know this from experience. If one starts to, let's say, get into a conversation that is clearly not nature of preference, maybe with a drunk person or and they get there for too long, every minute you spend, the harder it is to come out. You know this experience? Yeah. So that's why it says at the outset, because that's when you have the most power to make a decision and, politely make the right course of action to not come deeper into this rajas and tamas depth. Yeah. The killer of wisdom. The sense organs are subtler than the body. So the sense organs, these are sense instruments. The sense organs are the subtle body. You know the difference between sense organs and sense instruments? Sense instruments is the physical. Sense organs is that faculty in the brain which makes the physical do what it does. Yeah. So, and that's the subtle body. So the sense organs are subtler than the physical body. The mind is subtler than the sense organs. The intellect is subtler than the mind, and the self is subtler than the intellect. Does this sound like Panchakosha to you? Yeah, exactly. You got Annamaya Kosha, next one. You've got Pranamaya Kosha, then Manomaya Kosha, even more subtle, Vijnanamaya Kosha, even more subtle, and finally Anandamaya Kosha, the subtlest of the subtlest, and then finally Atman, the most subtle. Exactly the same. This is the Gita. That Koshas was from which Upanishads? Taittiriya, I think it was Taittiriya Upanishad. Totally different text, and yet exactly the correlated same teaching. Knowledge of that which is beyond the intellect. Knowledge of that which is beyond the intellect, that knowledge is beyond the intellect, steadies your emotions and destroys this hidden enemy. In other words, self-knowledge, awareness of your intellect, that knowledge we're speaking of, the awareness, even the awareness of the thought of awareness, right? There's still someone aware of that thought. That knowledge steadies your emotions and destroys your enemy. In fact, Krishna, we haven't gone through this statement yet, but he's going to make a statement. There is no greater purifier than self-knowledge, than knowing who you are. Why is that? Why is there no greater purifier in existence? You can put all these courses lined up, right? These seminars, line them up together for all eternity, all time. There is no greater purifier than self-knowledge.
Because it's invariable?
It's invariable, yeah. You see, as soon as I take, let's say, 10,000 courses, I stop my mind with them, the person who stopped their mind with 10,000 courses is changing. So next day, those 10,000 courses, the quality of that info is no longer valid. Suddenly now they're looking for an alternative, right? And also, due to the changing times, those 10,000 courses suddenly become invalidated, just like your encyclopedias. They become invalid the more time goes on.
So it's absolute as opposed to relative.
That's right. In other words, it's a constant battle trying to address and become really good at relative knowledge, right? Because the person is changing, and so is the relative knowledge changing according to the times of the demands of the society and the world. Yeah.
Absolute truth as opposed to relative truth.
That's right. So the absolute truth, there is no greater purifier than knowing who you are. Because, once again, we have to address this. When one knows that I am the invariable, non-changing, then despite the variable, what's the thought going to be about the variable then?
I'm not that.
I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. That's fine. I'm not that. That's Ishvara. I'm not that either. That's fine. I'm also not that. That's going to go on eternally. Eternal cause-effect relationship. And you just let that run because that is completely not in your control. Just like when you go to sleep and this dream comes out of you, you have no idea what's going to happen in that dream, do you? Totally out of your hands, even though that dream entirely depends on you, the dreamer. Without you, there is no dream, is there? Isn't that a paradox, huh? The dream needs you, and yet you, who gave dream its birth, do not control nor do you cause the dream to be. That's why we say the self is a causeless cause. It caused the world, but it didn't cause the world. Just like you, the dreamer, caused the dream, but you actually didn't cause the dream, did you? You didn't say, I'm going to now dream in 1 minute. You didn't do that, did you? But the dream was a cause. That one caused the dream, but it didn't cause the dream. Is that clear? That paradox? Yeah.
Could you say it caused the dream, but it doesn't control the dream? Is that a way of looking at it?
It didn't cause the dream because it didn't decide, because consciousness, awareness doesn't have a mind of its own. You see, okay. Okay, so now, chapter 3 summary. Arjuna asks why Krishna glorifies knowledge, Jnana Yoga, and yet encourages him to do Karma Yoga. Although Vedanta is clear on this topic, Arjuna does not want to fight, so he misunderstands the teaching. The inquirer needs to know how to listen. If you are attached to your habits, according to your likes and dislikes, vasana, you will misunderstand the teachings that require changes. Okay, several parts here. So what's the difference between one who understands this and one who doesn't? What determines that success ratio? What's the determinant there? The one who doesn't get it, whether they're aware or not, their likes and dislikes are modifying the teaching. That's why it's so hard sometimes to get across to a person. No matter how much they may know, they still cannot get across to the person because the listener's own likes and dislikes are modifying and therefore hearing only what they want to hear and not hearing what they don't want to hear. Totally missing out the entire teaching. That's why it's so hard to actually teach the truth. You have best intentions, you have the best teaching, and yet the listener still doesn't know that their own likes and dislikes are denying or accepting few parts here and there. Yeah, it's a challenge. Okay, so now, also Arjuna, of course, glorifies knowledge yoga. Why does he glorify knowledge yoga? Because, this was mentioned last week, there is nothing one can do to, quote, become the self. Why?
Because
you already are the self. You cannot get what you already are. You see? So no amount of action is going to produce what you're looking for. It's just a matter of accepting you already are that. That's why from the beginning we say you are actually already what you're looking for. You already are the answer. You're already, liberal. You're already free. So it's about knowing that. That's why it says it glorifies that knowledge yoga, because it's just a matter of knowing versus trying to do all of these things. Now, doing all of these things does not contradict knowing, because doing all of these things only leads to knowledge yoga becoming clear and being understood. If I don't do all these things, it's like Arjuna trying to change the situation, escape the situation, or accept, but he hasn't really fixed anything, has he? Yeah. So, knowledge and action, so where are we? Both knowledge and action are necessary. So karma yoga, as I said, doing something you have to do in order to purify. If you don't do, then there's no purification, and thus Jnana Yoga becomes impossible to fully assimilate. That's another paradox. Action, you can't do anything to be who you are, but if you don't do anything to be who you are, then nothing's going to happen. Ignorance is going to remain. Although Vedanta is clear, Arjuna does not want to fight, so he misunderstands the teaching. So now, is this statement why he misunderstands? Is that clear? Okay, someone give me an answer.
Because his dislike, he doesn't want, from his own perception, to fight his brothers in the
Agree? Yeah, good. All right. The inquirer needs to know how... Okay, we've done that. So both knowledge and action are necessary for self-inquiry because they have different results. Karma yoga prepares the mind so that knowledge yoga can set you free. That's just what we've been saying. Karma yoga gets the mind peaceful so it can discriminate in everyday situations. Discriminate what? Good. Satya from Mithya. And also, not only that, but just a clear mind to discriminate how to deal with and apply the right action, right? Because we're constantly confronted with new situations which require our actions. And if we're not clear, then we could do the wrong action, and then we have to deal with the consequences later. Yeah.
Is there always, in terms of that statement, is there always going to be Satya evident, or could it become discrimination between Mithya and Mithya?
That's what I just said. Yeah, Mithya, Mithya, and Satya, Mithya. Yeah. In other words, dealing with the worldly situations. Now, you can only deal with the world. So the proportion to how intelligent one deals with the worldly situations is a direct proportion to how clear their mind is. That's obvious. How clear their intellect is. If their intellect is covered with rajas, see, by the time they think of one idea, already they're on to the next idea. You've had a conversation with someone like that, they just can't hold the thought, can't hold the conversation. They're just jumping onwards. That is not conducive for discriminating Mithya from Mithya or Satya from Mithya. Yeah, so it's both. And, okay, so Karma Yoga gets the mind peaceful so it can discriminate in everyday situations. Basically, that's what we're saying. Mithya, Mithya. It requires doing what is best for the situation and living a simple, pure life. Okay, two parts. Best for this. Now, okay, question. How do you know what is best for the situation, right? Anyone got any ideas? Think about what you mentioned, Martin. You said something, there is an underlining dharma. We had a comment with dharma, right? Think about that. Now, okay, let's bring that back to how do I know what is the right course of action? Despite the fact that I actually don't have the full capacity to know what is the right course of action. What is one refuge that I do have to know? Go back to dharma.
Is it going to benefit everybody?
Good.
The whole.
Good. Is this going to hurt someone? If I was on the receiving end, would I appreciate this kind of response being given? Is this going to produce more peace or take away peace from the situation as it is?
So it's back to that biblical comparison, do unto others as you would do unto yourself type. Is that?
Say it louder. I want to get on the camera.
In the Bible, it's got that statement, do unto others as you would do unto yourself.
That's exactly the same. Yeah, you see? So in other words, is this situation going to hurt, cause someone to experience less than they deserve as a human being? Because, see, just ask yourself, would I appreciate this action being done onto me? That's how you know, instantly. Because we said reality is non-dual. That means if you don't appreciate that, nobody does. Yes, there are cases where the person is indoctrinated from the beginning, like those kamikaze killers. So for them, it's it seems fine to hurt. It's justified. So there's always
Perversions,
yeah, it's perverted. That's right. So there's always exceptions, no doubt. But on the most cases, you just ask yourself, is this producing peace for me and the whole, or is this taking away peace? Is this adding more confusion and more suffering? Okay.
We innately know when we see something that has a perversion, there's always an innate
exactly
knowing that is a perversion.
It feels in the body. You guys feel it. It's in the body. Sometimes the stomach or in the heart, in the chest, contraction. Yeah. All right. It is not okay. And a simple, pure life. That's a very big one. So, what does simple, pure life mean?
Why can't you have a complex, pure life?
Well, that's it. Well, complex. I mean, complexity implies a lot of causes. You have to address it, and then create more karma. You have to address karma later on. So it's a very busy life, and that busy life equals a lot of rajas, and a lot of rajas covers the intellect, And when there's a lot of rajas and intellect, one's not contemplating and properly discriminating the self from the not self. So you can't really get out of it. It's either a simple life or a complex life. Yeah, make up the mind, right? So what are some examples of a simple life? I think you already know that, because everyone's got examples, right? You already know what generally means. Okay, let's start from the opposite. This is an easy way to answer. What is the most complicated life possible? Let's say, tons of popular friends, connections, constantly attending, like being like a really busy person.
Running 5 businesses.
Yeah, like a really busy, like they're really passionate, very complex. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a complex life. So how do we simplify that one level down? Or drop the briefcase. Next step, change the clothing, perhaps. Not to get so much attention, because if you get a lot of attention, then you have to deal with that. And that's another cause. You have to address the effects, you see? Humility, humbleness. So in other words, see, I think that's a great state from the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist philosophy. How does it go again? Humility on that side. The more humble you are, the more humility, the easier life is. Because the more extravagant, flamboyant one is, the more they naturally draw attention, and they have to deal with the consequences.
And the more that will pump up the ego, and the more
that's right. Pride, pride, like I know, all of those things.
More battles with yourself, with your ego. Just try, even if you're aware,
yeah,
you actually can do more battle with yourself and your ego.
Yeah, you always have to. That's the point. You have to deal with it later on. All right. So what does it say here? Okay, so the renounce, the last statement. So now we know what pure life is. In other words, simplify life as much as you can. It is not necessary, desirable, nor possible to abandon action. Why? Because we're always acting. As long as the body's alive, it's acting. Even breathing is in act. Even dreaming and sleeping is action. The moment when you die, the body dies, that's when you stop acting. So that's when you can think about resting. But the irony is there's going to be no mind there to think about resting. So just live the life fully. If you renounce the world, you will quickly return to it for want of requisite maturity. Okay, so this is a final important statement, and that is, from the beginning, you see, nothing in the universe happens by accident, and everything that exists has a purpose to it. And so if that purpose, in other words, you as a person are the purpose. Now, if that purpose chooses to skip its certain trajectory or go sideways, that's fine. It's going to succeed, but life circumstances are going to turn it back to its proper trajectory where it needs to go. So similarly, if one attempts to avoid the confrontation in the moment as to hopes to receive some pleasure elsewhere, then okay, it's going to work, but the way it's set up due to the cause and effect relationship of the universe, it's being so complex, something's going to happen, and it's going to cause them to start thinking more about that old situation which they exited from. And the more they think about it due to the pain of the present situation, the more they're going to revert right back to it. But now, as I said from the beginning, because they waited that large gap, it's created a much bigger problem now. So they have to deal with it a lot more than before. So the point is, do not skip. When the situation is confronting, that's the best time to deal with it. Like a common example is, let's say there's a confrontation with a person, because most problems come usually from others in the world. And instead of trying to, say, oh, I'll deal with it, just deal with it later. Deal with it right in the moment, because that energy is going to stay. And that energy, as it stays, it's going to, it's tamas, it's going to cloud the intellect. And the person is not going to be thinking straight. That's why even if a conversation between two people, like a conflict, is not resolved, then they both walk away, and it looks like on the outside that everything's fine. But on the inside, there's either contraction, or there's smallness, or there's a lack of openness. Yeah. So we have to look at it right in the moment, because because it has consequences later on. You see? Okay. And so once again, if you renounce the world, you will quickly return for the maturity, which is what one needs to attend to. There is no skipping. All right, let's close. So next week, before we close, we will finish this and then go into... Oh, there's more. But besides finishing this, we'll go into a little bit more detail in the reference book, which is going to ask some questions to get our minds involved. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.